if Donald Trump wins, I could hypothetically see a situation where Alito and Thomas retire quite quickly, so that he can then get two more of his people on there. And if Biden wins, then I see the two of them kind of being entrenched. If I was a Supreme Court justice and I kept getting targeted, I would think, what's the point? I might as well just ride off into the sunset. But that's how it works. You got to vote.
Welcome to The Debrief, where we talk with the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the headlines they're covering and where the story's going next. I'm Sarah Bedford, and I'm here with Managing Editor Chris Irvine.
Hey.
Chris, they found another flag at an Alito residence.
That's right.
Can you tell us what they found and what the sort of fallout has been from Flaggate?
It's this secondary flag, which I don't think a lot of people really knew about. It dates back to the Revolutionary War. It was originally designed, I believe, for George Washington's troops, and I wondered if it was maybe some sort of a lesser known version of like the Gadsden flag or something, but for whatever reason, the New York Times has written this article on this secondary flag being flown at Samuel Alito's New Jersey beachside residence, and they have drawn comparisons to January 6th, because the flag was seen at the breaching of the Capitol, and they're therefore saying, see, look, he supports the insurrectionists. And this all comes back from the first story that they wrote about Mrs. Alito raising an upside-down American flag. It's ultimately, it feels like a targeted campaign towards the senior conservative members of the Supreme Court.
What might be the motivations behind some of this from Democrats? Because we have heard many complaints from Democrats about this conservative majority. I mean, why might they be amplifying these flags? Yeah,
well, it strikes me as certainly a campaign on from the left to undermine the legitimacy of the Supreme Court. And we've seen an awful lot of this in the last couple of years, in particular with the overturning of the Dobbs decision, which led to Roe v. Wade being cancelled out. And this kind of cacophony has just continued, really. There was stories from about a year ago that targeted the legitimacy of Clarence Thomas, calling into his suitability for the court. They seem to be doing it with Alito a lot now as well. And I think it is particularly timely because there's some important decisions coming out from the Supreme Court. The stories clearly have been released at the time to do maximum damage or create maximum impact. And one of the big decisions, of course, will be relates to Donald Trump and classified documents. So if something was to come back to the court in favor of Trump, then a lot on the left can turn around and say, see, the Supreme Court's been in it with Trump from the very beginning. And I feel it's all kind of designed to question this legitimacy of the judicial branch and maybe lead again to reform of the court, discussion of court packing. And it's never really kind of going to go away until the pendulum swings back to the left. But it could be an awful long time before that happens.
Do you think there's a risk now, you have Kyrsten Sinema, who is opposed to the filibuster, and Joe Manchin, both of them, at least in Kyrsten Sinema's case, not super likely to be back in the Senate. Joe Manchin definitely not going to be back in the Senate. Is there a chance that there's a real risk we could see changes to the Supreme Court if we continue to have a Democratic Senate when some of those guardrails are wearing off?
I find that highly unlikely. I think it would be too difficult. I think Congress can't agree on anything at the best of times, and I think ramming that through is going to set a pretty kind of dangerous precedent. The best way to do it is to vote for your guy in the election. And if Donald Trump wins, I could hypothetically see a situation where Alito and Thomas retire quite quickly, so that he can then get two more of his people on there. And if Biden wins, then I see the two of them kind of being entrenched. If I was a Supreme Court justice and I kept getting targeted, I would think, what's the point? I might as well just ride off into the sunset. But that's how it works. You got to vote, and you got to go for your person that you think is going to help balance things out a bit more, or really kind of entrench in this 6-3 majority. I just can't see court packing being a realistic scenario.
The Supreme Court was a huge issue in 2016 because of the death of Scalia, and to a lesser extent it was an issue in 2020 because there was the death of RBG right before the election, even though the Trump filling, that was not really part of the question. Let's say that the Supreme Court, as it is expected to, comes down somewhere on the spectrum of in Trump's favor on the 2 Trump cases that it has before it right now. Do you see the Supreme Court becoming a 2024 issue? It's not right now, but could it be?
Yeah, I think it always kind of bubbles up, doesn't it? And it helps kind of crystallize, I guess, left versus right quite succinctly. I think with the death of Scalia, that really kind of gave a real opportunity. It was basically kind of a election campaign, wasn't it? You vote for me and I'll make sure that the right person gets in the court. So there may have to be a scenario where something like that were to happen if somebody was to retire or pass away. I do think that the biggie which happened was Roe. That's not really there anymore, and so I don't know if that would be less galvanizing for the court and using that as an election issue. But it certainly could rear its head. People get very animated about the court. It's a sort of thing that, as a Brit, I've never fully understood. But you couldn't name who the judges are in the UK. But it's just
Does the UK have a Supreme Court?
It does. Yeah, I couldn't tell you a thing about it.
I should probably know that.
Yeah, but it will always be there in the background. Whether it's a sort of main issue or the periphery, I guess will remain to be seen. But I think a few things might have to fall into place for that to actually come to fruition.
Well, Chris, thank you so much for being here today. You can get more reporting from Chris and the rest of the political team at washingtonexaminer.com.